My name is Martha Lewis, and I turned 70 last winter. I thought the evening would be quiet, a simple dinner with my son, his wife, and a few neighbors. Nothing grand, just warmth, laughter, and maybe a slice of my apple pie. I spent the morning polishing the old silverware George and I bought on our first anniversary. He's been gone 5 years, but I still set a place for him at the table. Habit, I suppose. Some habits feel like prayers. By 5 o'clock, the house smelled of roasted chicken, butter, and cinnamon. I'd lit the good candles, the ones shaped like tiny pine cones, and played Glenn Miller on the old radio. The living room glowed with the kind of golden light that makes you think maybe, just maybe, life has softened its grip on you. When the doorbell rang, I smoothed my skirt and whispered, "Here we go, George." Peter came in first, smiling that nervous smile of his, the one he's had since childhood. Then came Clare, polished, poised, beautiful in a sharp way. She carried a microphone in one hand, of all things, and said she'd borrowed it from her office to spice up the evening. I laughed politely, not knowing what she meant. Dinner began kindly enough. There was chatter about weather, work, and how the roads up here were never properly salted. I poured wine, and for a moment I felt content, surrounded by people, pretending none of us were lonely in our own ways. Then Claire stood, holding the microphone like she was hosting a show. "Let's raise a glass," she said brightly, her smile too wide, to Martha, 70 years old, still hanging on to every little thing her husband left behind, even his slippers. The room chuckled. I didn't. She wasn't finished. "She refuses to sell this house," Claire continued. "Peter and I keep telling her it's too much space for one person. But you know Martha. She'd rather live alone in a museum than admit she's getting old." Laughter again, thinner this time. Peter stared at his plate. The candles flickered as if embarrassed for me. I felt the sting of heat behind my eyes, but it wasn't shame. It was anger, steady, clear, long overdue. I set my glass down, the sound sharp as a gunshot. My voice came out calm, almost too calm. "Claire," I said, meeting her eyes across the table. "You have 10 minutes. 10 minutes to leave my house." And just like that, the room forgot how to breathe. After Claire stormed out of the dining room, the sound of her heels echoing down the hallway, no one moved. My son, Peter, kept his eyes fixed on his plate as if the chicken bones might tell him what to do next. The guests shifted in their chairs, uncertain whether to finish dessert or disappear into the cold night. I remember breathing in the smell of burnt candles and sweet wine, willing myself not to tremble. For years I had let small insults pass, the suggestions that I move into somewhere easier, the pitying looks when I carried my own groceries. Tonight had only stripped the mask off what had been there all along. They thought I was a fragile old woman waiting for permission to fade away. I pushed back my chair and began clearing the dishes. That's what I always did, kept my hands busy when my heart was heavy. Peter stood finally, voice low. "Mom, she didn't mean it like that." You know how Claire gets. I looked at him, the boy I'd raised to be gentle, now a man caught between guilt and fear. "She meant every word," I said quietly. "But you're not to apologize for her." The guests mumbled excuses and left one by one, coats whispering against the doorframe. When the last car pulled away, the house felt too still. I washed each plate slowly, listening to the faucet hiss. Peter lingered in the doorway. "Do you want me to stay tonight?" he asked. "No," I said. "Go home. Talk to your wife. Tell her she's got 9 minutes left." He half smiled, not sure whether I was joking. I wasn't. The next morning, the house looked smaller, the way places do after a storm passes through. A thin crust of snow covered the porch. I made coffee, fed Daisy the cat, and sat in George's old chair by the window. The silence pressed close, but it didn't feel lonely this time. It felt earned. My phone rang around noon. It was Clare. I let it buzz until the sound stopped. Then I called Mr. Coleman, George's old friend and the attorney who handled his estate. He'd come to our Christmas dinners for years, always bringing a bottle of red I could never afford. "Morning, Martha," he said when he picked up. "I heard there was an incident." "There was," I replied. "Do you still have the envelope George left with you?" "I do," he said, voice tightening. "Do you want me to bring it over?" "Yes. Tonight." I spent the afternoon cleaning the house, not out of vanity, but control. I vacuumed until the cord stretched thin, dusted every frame, polished George's old pocket watch. Every motion steadied me. When I found the vase, Clare had moved from the mantel to make room for her flowers. I set it back in its rightful place. It wasn't about decoration. It was about balance. By evening, the snow had turned to rain. Peter returned alone, shoulders hunched, eyes tired. He looked younger in defeat. "She won't come," he said. "She says you humiliated her." I set 2 cups on the table. "She humiliated herself. Sit down." When Mr. and Coleman arrived, the living room smelled of coffee and lemon polish. He placed a thick brown envelope on the table between us. My hands hesitated before touching it. "I never thought I'd need this," I murmured. "George did," the lawyer said gently. Peter watched, confused. I broke the seal and unfolded a letter written in my husband's tidy script. The paper smelled faintly of cedar, like the drawers he used to line with his shirts. "My dearest Martha," it began. "If this letter reaches you, someone has tried to take what you've built or shame you for protecting it. You've always been too kind. Don't let that kindness become surrender. This document secures the house, your accounts, and every piece of what we built together. No one, not even family, can touch it without your consent." Peter rubbed his temples. "Dad really planned for this?" "He planned for everything," I said, my throat thickening. Mr. Coleman laid out the legal papers. Clare's name was nowhere. Every asset was under my sole authority, with a clause that any attempt at coercion would revoke her marital claim. It wasn't revenge, it was protection, born from a man who'd loved me enough to think ahead. Peter sat back, face pale. "Mom, I didn't know she was talking to you like that. I thought you were exaggerating." "I know," I said. "You wanted to believe the best in her. So did I." The rain tapped against the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell struck 7. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "Eat that pie before it goes stale." He laughed despite himself, and the sound loosened something in the air. We ate in silence for a while. Then he said, almost a whisper, "I'll make this right." "You can only make your own right," I answered. "The rest will sort itself." After he left, I wandered through the house. Lights dimmed. The photographs along the hallway watched me pass. George in uniform. Peter at 5 with jam on his face. Me holding a pie too big for the table. Time had turned them into witnesses. In the kitchen, the birthday decorations still hung like ghosts, paper streamers drooping, half-melted candles, the word happy curling at the edges. I thought about pulling them down, but didn't. Let them stay one more night, reminders of how fragile celebrations can be. I poured another cup of coffee and sat by the window again. The clock ticked loud enough to feel alive. Outside, a neighbor's porch light flickered. I imagined them sitting inside, unaware that a house just a few doors down had changed forever. George's photograph sat on the mantel. I spoke to it the way I always did when my thoughts tangled. "You were right," I whispered. "You said dignity has to be protected, even from family." The wind pushed against the siding, soft but insistent, as if agreeing. I closed my eyes and let the sound fill the room. For the first time since he'd died, I didn't feel the weight of absence. I felt presence, a quiet, steady pulse reminding me that even after loss, strength doesn't vanish. It only waits to be remembered. Daisy jumped onto my lap, curling into the space between my arms. I stroked her fur and whispered, "We did fine tonight, didn't we, girl?" She purred, the same rhythm as George's heartbeat when I used to rest my head on his chest. I smiled. Maybe love never really leaves. It just changes its shape. Outside. The rain softened into drizzle. I stood, turned off the lights, and watched the reflection of the room in the window. I didn't see an old woman who'd been humiliated. I saw someone still standing. The night didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt earned. 2 nights later, I heard tires crunching the gravel outside my house. Through the window, I saw headlights cutting across the snow, a car door slamming, and then Claire standing on my porch. She wasn't alone. Peter followed behind, his shoulders tense, his face drawn. I stayed seated at the kitchen table. Let them come to me. When she stepped inside, Claire's perfume arrived first, sharp and expensive. Her voice trembled, but her chin was lifted. "I came to talk," she said. "Not to fight." I gestured toward the chair opposite me. "Then talk." She hesitated before sitting. Peter stayed near the door, caught between us. Claire smoothed her skirt, avoiding my eyes. "You embarrassed me," she began, "in front of everyone. Do you know what that's done to Peter's reputation? To mine?" I sipped my tea, letting the silence stretch. The clock ticked in the hallway, the same steady rhythm that had marked the moment I'd told her to leave. "What you did," I said quietly, "wasn't embarrassment. It was cruelty dressed as humor." Her mouth tightened. "I was joking." "No. You were testing how far you could go before I'd break." Peter stepped forward. "Mom, please, let's not do this again." I looked at him. "If we don't do this now, it will happen again, and next time, it will be worse." Claire folded her arms. "You're overreacting. You've always hated me because I'm not like you." "That's true," I said. "You're nothing like me." The words hung in the air. For a moment, I thought she might cry, but her pride was stronger. She reached into her bag and pulled out a document, a printed bank statement. "Look, I paid for that party. Every cent. I was trying to do something nice." I leaned forward, studying the page. Her name was on the transactions, but so was mine. "You used my credit card, Claire." "I was going to replace it. You wouldn't even notice." "That's the problem," I said. "You think my age means I don't notice anything." Peter's voice broke through. "Claire, stop. Mom already knows everything." She froze. "What are you talking about?" "Mr. Coleman's knock came exactly then. I'd asked him to return. Not for papers this time, but for closure. He stepped inside, nodding politely at both of them. "Evening," he said, setting his briefcase on the counter. "Martha, you asked me to bring the confirmation forms?" I nodded. Claire's confusion deepened. "What forms?" she demanded. "The ones that finalize the transfer of your mother-in-law's estate into a private trust," he replied evenly. "You'll need to sign this acknowledgement stating you have no claim over her assets." Her eyes widened. "You can't do that. Peter and I—" "Peter has no objection," I interrupted. "He already signed his consent yesterday." Peter's gaze met mine. There was apology in it, maybe even relief. Claire looked from him to me, realization dawning. "This is revenge," she spat. "No," I said. "This is respect, for myself, something you never learned to give." Mr. Coleman opened the folder, sliding the paper toward her. "You can sign it tonight, or it will proceed to court on Monday. But either way, it will be done." Claire's hands shook. "You can't just erase me from this family." "I'm not erasing you," I said softly. "You did that yourself." The rain outside turned to sleet, tapping against the windows like quiet applause. Peter moved to the table and placed a pen beside her. For a long minute, no one spoke. Then she snatched the pen, scribbled her name, and shoved the paper away. "There," she said. "Happy now?" "No," I replied. "But I'm at peace." Mr. Coleman gathered the documents, his expression unreadable. "I'll take care of the rest," he said, giving a small nod before leaving. The door closed behind him, and the silence he left was heavier than before. Claire stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. "You think you've won, Martha, but you'll end up alone." I met her eyes. "Alone is better than surrounded by people who despise you quietly." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Without another word, she walked to the door, coat clutched tight around her. Peter didn't follow. When the door clicked shut, he exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath for years. For a while, neither of us spoke. The house smelled faintly of lemon oil and rain. "Finally," he said, "she won't come back." "I know," I answered. "She'll hate me for this." "Maybe, but hate fades faster than guilt. Give her time." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I should have protected you sooner." I reached across the table, touching his hand. "You were protecting what you thought was love. There's no shame in that." We sat like that for a while, mother and son, no words left to wound or heal. When he finally stood to leave, I walked him to the door. Outside, the porch light haloed him in gold. "Call me tomorrow," I said. "I will." After his car disappeared into the dark, I stayed by the door, listening to the quiet. The world outside was washed clean by sleet, the driveway gleaming under the lamplight. Inside, the clock ticked again, calm and steady. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel old. I felt solid, grounded, whole. Tomorrow would come, with its small routines and quiet chores. But tonight belonged to me, the night I stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. The next morning opened pale and clean, sunlight sliding through the curtains like forgiveness. The air smelled faintly of coffee and rain-soaked pine. I stood by the window, watching a thin mist lift off the yard where Claire's tire tracks still marked the mud. The lines would fade by noon. They always do. Peter arrived before breakfast. He looked smaller in his coat, as if shame had taken an inch from his height. He held a brown paper bag from the diner down the road. Inside were 2 cups of oatmeal, one loaded with blueberries, the way his father used to eat it. "Peace offering," he said. I set out spoons, and we ate without ceremony. When we were halfway through, he whispered, "She's gone to her sister's." I nodded. The quiet between us wasn't awkward. It was the honest kind. The kind that follows truth finally spoken aloud. After he left, I washed the bowls and opened the old record player George had repaired a decade ago. A scratchy trumpet filled the room. I wiped the counter, rearranged the mail, fed Daisy, and realized the silence no longer frightened me. It had become space, room for breathing, for rebuilding. That week, I met Mr. Mark Coleman at the library. He brought the final paperwork confirming the trust transfer. "You're safe now," he said. I told him I already was. He smiled and invited me to a community seminar on protecting seniors from financial manipulation. "Come share your story," he urged. "People listen when truth sounds lived in." I went. The library smelled of dust and lemon polish. A dozen faces turned toward the podium where Mr. Coleman spoke about boundaries and inheritance. When questions opened, a woman in a red scarf asked if it was wrong to doubt her own daughter about money. Her voice cracked on daughter. I raised my hand. "I thought love meant silence," I said. I was wrong. Love without respect is just habit. Afterward, she thanked me, tears shining at the corners of her eyes. That moment planted something. 2 weeks later, the librarian called. They were starting a small group called Elder Voices, a circle for anyone who'd felt used or invisible. Would I help lead it? I said yes before my fear could form words. Peter came early to our first meeting, setting up chairs and pretending not to. He brought daisies for the table. 7 people showed up: widows, retirees, a man who'd lost his savings to his nephew's business idea. We shared coffee and stories. No one offered pity. We offered listening, which is rarer. By spring, the circle had doubled. The church lent us its fellowship hall. Every month, new faces arrived carrying folded letters, receipts, and the soft exhaustion of being underestimated. We didn't fix each other. We witnessed each other. That was enough. Claire stayed silent for months. Then one bright May afternoon, a letter came. Her handwriting was careful, as if she feared the paper might judge her. She apologized for the cruelty at the party, said she was in therapy, said she was learning the difference between control and care. She asked for nothing. I read it twice and placed it in George's shoebox beside the postcards he'd sent me over the years. Forgiveness doesn't have to announce itself. Sometimes it just stops keeping score. Summer arrived tenderly. Peter rebuilt the back steps and planted tomatoes. I baked again, nothing fancy, just the way George liked them, burnt at the edges. We fell into an easy rhythm: Sunday breakfast, Wednesday calls. Sometimes we spoke of Clare, mostly we didn't. Absence, when accepted, becomes peace. In June, the library hosted a showcase for elder voices. The participants would read short essays about what dignity meant to them. The librarian asked me to go first. Standing at the podium, I felt George's steadiness settle over me like a shawl. "I once threw a woman out of my house," I began, but what I really threw out was the version of myself who thought she had to beg for respect. The room stayed utterly still. I spoke of the dinner, the laughter that cut too deep, the sentence that saved me. "You have 10 minutes to leave my house." Then I spoke of what came after: the quiet, the rebuilding, the small, fierce acts of self-respect that followed. "Dignity," I said, "isn't loud. It's the voice that says enough and keeps standing even when no one claps." When I finished, the applause was soft but long. People wiped their eyes. Mr. Coleman shook my hand, proud as a father. Peter waited near the back, smiling with tears on his cheeks. For once, he didn't look caught between worlds. He looked home. That evening, I walked back through the park. Fireflies blinked across the grass, tiny witnesses to the day's gentleness. I thought of George and how he used to tease that I'd outlive every plant in this yard because stubbornness is half sunlight. He was probably right. At home. The house greeted me the way old friends do, quietly, without needing words. The chair across from mine sat empty but kind, no longer an accusation. Daisy curled at my feet, tail flicking like a metronome. I poured tea, opened the window, and let the night in. The maple outside rustled, shedding the last of its blossoms. On the counter sat the postcard from Detroit, edges soft from years of touching. "Stay fierce," he'd written. I whispered it back. tasting the strength of the words as they left my mouth. Tomorrow there would be errands, the grocery store, the laundry, another elder voices meeting, ordinary things. But inside those ordinary things was a new rhythm, steady as a heartbeat. I wasn't waiting for anyone to tell me I'd done well. I already knew. I stood, turned off the kitchen light, and let the room fall into shadow except for the small lamp by the window. The glow reached the far corner where George's slippers used to rest. I smiled, not in sadness, but in recognition. We had kept our promise to live fully, even apart, outside. A train horn echoed through the valley. I imagined its sound threading the dark, carrying stories like ours from one small town to another, quiet acts of courage that rarely make the news but keep the world from forgetting its decency. I lifted my cup, the tea gone lukewarm, and said softly, "I stood tall, George." The room, gentle and alive, answered in silence. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.